Business is a hard way to make money, but warlording is awesome. If you want to break out of the grind, just be a warlord. Most dangerous country on earth, statistically, it's the Vatican, because it has more crime than any other country on earth.
What's the sketchiest situation you found yourself in?
I wrote a book called The World's Most Dangerous Places, so if I'm not in the most dangerous places, I'm not doing my job. Closest I came to death was when a Liberian rebel shot a bullet like 2 inches from my ear. So that's a good measurable distance, right?
What are the big dangers of travel?
Traveling is safer than staying at home because you're entering an ecosystem designed to keep you safe. Statistically, you're more likely to slip in your tub and hurt yourself than you are being eaten by a shark, kidnapped by a terrorist. I mean, the odds are embarrassing. I used to set up meetings, secret meetings between one-star American generals and Taliban leaders in Kabul. This one general was like, what the hell am I going to ask this guy? You know, he's scared. And I'm like, okay, ask him about his kids. Talk about the weather. But they would come back saying, I'm not afraid of the Taliban anymore. I get them. I get why they're doing what they're doing.
That's such a great metaphor for so many things that people fear. Welcome to 2%. I'm your host, Michael Easter. Today we are bringing on Robert Young Pelton. This guy is a journalist who's been traveling to and covering the world's most dangerous places and conflicts for decades. He's going to talk to us why getting out of your comfort zone and taking on a little bit of risk will actually make you feel far more alive and enhance your mindset and allow you to do bigger things in life. Not to mention, this guy has the most amazing, insane stories I've ever heard. He's going to tell us about the time he got kidnapped by rebels in Colombia for more than a week. He'll talk to us about initial meetings with the Taliban, all sorts of crazy stories. Really entertaining episode, really insightful conversation that has a lot of useful takeaways. So with all that said, bring Robert on right now. All right, well, Robert, thanks for coming on 2%.
My pleasure.
All right, for those who are unfamiliar, what's the thrust of your work?
I focus on conflict, mostly emerging groups. So, dirty wars, I guess, is a good way to describe it. But, a lot of them are non-state actors. They might be PMCs, mercenaries, rebel groups, jihadis. I spent some time with special forces, which, of course, are not a splinter group, but they're an unusual group that doesn't usually get covered. So I try to look at the cutting edge of conflict and warfare and what that means. So I guess that's the shortest way I can do it. But more importantly is I spend time with these people. So I'm in the middle of their world.
Yeah.
And I spend quality time so I can understand their motivations, what it's really like, et cetera, et cetera.
How long have you been doing this?
I guess since the early 90s. I used to be a marketing genius. So I had a nice big office with my name on it. And I had 50 employees and I was on the Inc. 500, number 146. And I did that transition when I'm early 40s, I guess. So, I was getting into trouble before getting into trouble was cool.
So I want to give listeners some context here. What's the sketchiest situation you found yourself in?
You're asking like a football player, what was his favorite game?
I love that you have to, you're going through a file and it's a big file. Like that enough.
Yeah, it's not even worth trying to ask me what the most dangerous thing I did because I wrote a book called The World's Most Dangerous Places. So if I'm not in the most dangerous places, I'm not doing my job. So it's not like I'm an accountant who got caught up in some, mall shooting. I literally go to find the most intense place I can find. And from that comes a number of experiences, but I tell everybody everywhere I go, there's little old ladies there. So it's not for me to brag about how close I came to death unless you can measure like a bullet, hitting a wall behind you. But
yeah,
I guess the closest I came to death was when a Liberian rebel shot a bullet like 2 inches from my ear. So that's a good measurable distance. Right?
What was going on there that you were over there?
It was a gunfight on the road. When you're surrounded. We were in Vanjima. The Charles Taylor's forces used to attack us every day, and then the rebels would go out to meet them on the road, and they'd all start shooting at each other until enough people died, and then they go back to whatever they were doing before that. And I tend to get up close to the action, so sometimes the people are shooting from behind me and over my head. So, but I mean, again, it's not my place to brag about because there's people that I can leave a war anytime I want.
Right. That's a really good point.
There's people that can't leave wars. So.
And you also left your marketing job in the 90s. So tell us how you even got into marketing in the first place, and then what prompted you to leave that role despite its success and the money and all of that.
That's a good question. So when I was a kid, I was 16, I lived in a car. I was kicked out of the house when I was 16. I didn't have any money, so it was cheaper to buy a car than I'd get an apartment. And I picked fruit for a living, the whole John Steinbeck thing. And I had taken an aptitude and interest test in high school. And it basically said I could either be an astronaut, an advertising man, or an adventurer. So the only real job in there was advertising man. So when I got tired of living in a car, it was a 1963 Rambler classic station wagon, quite nice, Pullmanized, they call it. I drove to Toronto and I called everybody in the phone book, literally starting with the A's, and said, I'm supposed to be an advertising man. I'm going to come down and you can give me a job. And they're like, sure, kid. So three CEOs actually agreed to meet with me. And remember, I'm 16 going on 17 at this time. And I met one gentleman who was impressed with my gall, I guess, and said, well, I started in the mailroom, so maybe you can start in the mailroom, work your way up, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. So I went down to the mailroom, said, give me a job. He said, what experience do you have in the mailroom? I said, none. He said, out of here. So I worked as a mailroom in Merrill Lynch, stock brokerage, for 6 months to get experience to come back and get a job in the mailroom at what was then BBDO. And I then began writing. I read all the mail, right? So I was a mail boy. So I wrote a marketing plan, which was distributed by the creative director and vice president to basically shame the creative people because they hadn't come up with some cool idea to get this account.
Yep.
And I remember him telling me that he distributed this thing, which I typed on a Remington. And he said, you know who wrote that? He said, you know who wrote that? The mail boy wrote that. And you know how much we pay him? He said, $1 an hour. So everybody hated me, but they promoted me to copywriter. Anyway, so long story short, I worked my way up and I moved to the States on a Melania visa, being a genius. And I started working for people in Hollywood and California and started my own company and was very successful at solving corporate problems that people had because of my sort of ground truth approach to marketing research, which I had done when I was 16, trying to get a job as a copywriter. I just go out and talk to people and ask them, what would you do? What do you think of this? How would you handle it?
About a product, and situation, whatever it might be. You're hitting the ground.
And and I had no fear. But, I used to sell chickens when I was 10 years old. I went to a boys' school that we raised animals, slaughtered them, sold them door to door. So I'd been taught how to fear no one in the middle of the winter, trying to empty your basket of like bacon and ham and chickens, whatever. So, and plus I enjoy talking to people. So anyway, bottom line is that around when I was in my early 40s, the guy that originally I worked for that had promoted me to being copywriter, actually left his job after I left and moved to Spain, bought a monkey, put an earring in, started writing poetry. And then after doing that for 6 months, sold the monkey, took the earring out, threw away the beret, moved back with his wife and I think 12 kids, and died of a heart attack. And I thought, wow, he was like 50-something. And my father contracted Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a debilitating disease that takes, months. It took him 2 years to die. And one of my clients was playing racquetball, actually my largest client, and broke his, collarbone, and it wouldn't heal. And so he went back in and they did x-rays and they said, you've got bone cancer. You got like 6 months to live. So I had always taken a month off to do whatever I wanted to do, because the test of a good business is that if you can leave for a month and it's still there when you get back, you actually have a good business, right? And so I would pick a place on a map and I'd just say, I'm going to go, Borneo, Africa, whatever. I did things like the Camel Trophy. I drove around the island of Borneo. I did all kinds of interesting things. And sometimes there were journalists on these expeditions and they would make fun of me. You're a dilettante. You're like this business guy that, takes 1 month off to do something and then back in the office. And I said, well, what's real adventure? And they said, try going to a country where they're trying to kill you. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? I said, well, there's places on Earth where if you go there, they will kidnap you, shoot you, harm you. And I'm like, really? Now, you remember, I'm not naive, but I didn't think of this as something you would do on your vacation with your month off. And I was intrigued by that. And I'm like, well, give me an example. And they said, well, like Eastern Turkey, there's this warlord. And in Afghanistan, there's all these militias and, nobody goes there. And I said, well, if I go there, would you interview them? And they go, oh, hell yeah. Right? So My first trip was to meet a guy named Bouchak who had tried to kill the Pope. And we drove up on his compound, and I didn't realize that these guys had guns trained on us because, a gun pointed at you is a very small visual object. So we drive right in, and the guy wants to know what I want. And I said, well, I'm here to meet you. And they're like, so what, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to write a story about you. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to send friends down to interview you. He's like, no, you're not. So he doesn't know what to do, but he's polite because he's Kurdish, right? And he decides we're going to have a shooting contest. So I'm a pretty good shot. So his bodyguard throws a Pepsi can in the air, and I nail it, right? And so he does that for Bouchak, and he misses. And then Bouchak nods to his bodyguard, who walks over and executes the Pepsi can, right? So that's how you learn things, right? It's
like in the future, miss that.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I learned that this is very interesting, right? And as I set up these interviews for other people, I began to realize that, these people are spending a lot of time to get me to these places. So the next one was the Taliban, right? I set up interviews with the leaders of the Taliban. And again, I'm very forward, and I remember meeting with the Talibs in Pakistan in the refugee camps there, where they bring the wounded. And I remember meeting this old mullah, and actually he was a young mullah, but he looked like he was old because he had a big beard, and he had this kind of 1930s pistol and bandolier with bullets. And I was explaining that I wanted to set up interviews with the mullahs, and he said, no, it's impossible. And I said, what? Because it's haram, right? It's forbidden. And at that time, the Talibs were very, picky about technology and stuff. So I said, well, then you're like women hiding behind the burqa.
Yeah, because you want a camera on them, right?
Like, I was not filming him at that time. I just said, I was setting up the interview. Yeah. And he just sort of stopped, and there was a deep silence. And then he said, okay, I see what you're saying. Because my pitch was, if you want to communicate to the outside world, you need to be filmed, right? And they had a shura in Kabul, and they agreed that they would do these interviews. And so I sent a friend of mine who's a Muslim, he's Turkish, and he interviewed all the Taliban. I guess my claim to fame was, it was fairly easy for me to approach these people and get them to agree to be interviewed, which was confounding a lot of journalists. But most journalists don't do what I do, which is go there directly and sit and wait and make friends and talk to people.
How have you learned to read people and what they want from your interactions?
Well, if they're shooting at you and they don't stop, they probably don't like you, right? That's
rule number one.
Yeah. I think most people don't like you. They're suspicious. Why would you spend time with me? What are you going to film? Who are you really working for?
Yeah, especially if you're an outsider.
Exactly. And I don't know how much you've seen of my work or how much you've watched, but it's my stuff's from the inside, right? It's like I'm there, and these people never call me up and say, I'm going to kill you, right? Like I did this and you said that, I'm going to come kill you. No, nobody does that. When I wrote my book, License to Kill, I got like indignant letters from some of the people, and I said, you shouldn't have been telling me that then. Like, well, you're not supposed to print that. And I'm like, well, you were talking, but how did you remember that? And I said, because that's my job. Like this, but nobody sues me, right? They just literally can't friggin' believe that I remembered all that stuff they told me because because I asked them questions like, how does your business work? Like, you're with Al Qaeda and you want to know, how do you pay for this? Like, how much does that cost? What is the salary of this guy? How many people die? Whatever. These are legitimate business, almost like marketing questions, right? On how do you function? Competitive analysis, I guess, would be a good word. And I also ran ground networks, which did the same thing, very penetrating questions in Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Myanmar, Libya. So I take maybe a business, marketing, humanistic sentiment into the battlefield, and I think I humanize what these people are doing. And I'm very resistant to bullshit or propaganda because I used to sling it, right? Mm-hmm. So I just think people respect that. And people can talk crap about me, but I've actually been pretty bulletproof. There's been a couple of times where people try to manufacture crap against me, and I'm like, yeah, whatever, But for the most part, I think people say, what was his motivation? What was the end product? And did that accurately capture that group, that war, that battle, that era? And the verdict is yes.
What did you learn about people and what people desire from copywriting?
So copywriting is interesting because they give you a box. It's 2 inches by 2 inches, and they say fill it with stuff. And you're going, oh, I got to describe an entire truck. How do I do that in like 120 words or 15 words or whatever? And you learn to shape and economize on what you're trying to communicate. And you also want to hit the button, right? You want to evoke some sense of emotional lust or desire for that thing. Usually a very mundane thing, right? And you're looking for people's emotions and maybe even their weaknesses sometime. And if you get it right, they read the ad. Most people don't read the whole ad, but they read the ad and they feel good about the product. You know, I worked with Steve Jobs on the launch of the Lisa, which was a desktop computer, basically ripped off of the Xerox system. And I think the price was $10,000 then. And I used to argue with Jobs. I said, no, nobody's going to put this on their desk. And he's like, no, people that are cool put it on his desk. I said, no, because people that can afford this computer are business people. And business people think computers sit on their secretary's desk. So you've got a blockage there between what you think you're doing versus what people want, right? And it failed miserably, okay? But, I got along with Jobs. He was not a pleasant person to a lot of people.
Yeah, so one of your goals of your work is to understand the hearts and minds of the people that you meet. Tell me about that.
Okay, so hearts and minds is literally a propaganda term, right? Okay. So I don't know if I use that term. What I want to know is context.
Okay.
When you go into a war, yes, there might be 2 sides, there might be 20 different sides, whatever, but you need to know the context of why these people who would normally be baking bread or driving a truck or whatever are now in a ditch shooting at each other, right? And I'm not a conspiracy nut, but I know that it costs money to buy bullets. I know it costs money to give food to a soldier. I know it costs money to resupply ammunition and pay for people to bring this. So I'm really intrigued by that. And this is one thing where, whether it's the war in Iraq and BS WMDs, or whether it's the war in Iran now, or the war in Ukraine or whatever, I'm really good at dissecting the narrative versus the reality, right? And people always want to tell you what's really going on. You know, you're in a freezing house in Ukraine, and this guy's explaining that he used to be an executive, and now he's killing Russians with a drone, and Russians used to be their friends, and now they're the enemies, and what the hell? And, these people want to share their sense of bafflement sometimes with an outsider. So this is a two-way street. It's not just me going, oh, I know everything, I'm going to go home now. It's literally trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah. What have you learned from talking to warlords and terrorists?
That business is a hard way to make money, but warlording is awesome. Like if you want to break out of the grind, just be a warlord, because once you get past politics and laws, and again, this is a very dangerous period in history we live in, where they just took laws and went, out they go. Once you break the law, you're a criminal, but technically, if it's lawless where you live, you're in charge. And you see this in Sudan, right, with Hemeti. You see this in Libya with Haftar, with these sort of constructs, these proxies that have been created.
When you go to these places that are kinetic, you go meet with the Taliban, how does that reframe your relationship to home once you get home?
Well, I'm an anomaly. I don't have a heroin addiction. I didn't write a book about, passing out in an airport, and I never tried to kill myself. I don't have any negative effects from all the things I've experienced. I've been married to the same woman for almost 50 years. I have a beautiful home life. To me, this was important to have perspective. Just like when I go into a client's office and he makes shoes or baseball cards, I did the launch of Upper Deck card. It's important to have another perspective. You can't be immersed in it. So you cannot live in war, right? Statistically, you're going to get killed anyways. But you also have to be a good person. You also have to have a moral center. You have to have responsibilities. You have to make money. You have to do like really dull, boring things, whether it's cut the grass or take your dog to the vet or whatever. So that's a discipline, and it's a good discipline. And it's not one that people find cool. And I don't have a tattoo. I feel so bad. I can't go on these bro shows because I don't go to the gym. But I'm happy. I'm 70 years old and I'm happy. I'm healthy. I wake up every morning and listen to the birds. I play with my dogs. I write stuff. If I travel, I jump on a plane. I go to some place, meet with some horrible person. So it's hard to explain this, but it's maybe like a military lifestyle or like an old explorer lifestyle where you have to balance both.
Yeah. When people travel, a lot of times they will go on the State Department website and they have the sort of 4 rankings, which are basically safe. 2 is exercise caution. 3 is reconsider travel. 4 is do not go. Do you find those to be accurate?
No, come on, man. Like when I started writing The World's Most Dangerous Places, it was as a response to the complete idiocy of the State Department in not covering real risks to travelers, right? Whether it be disease, whether it be crime, whether it be violence, whatever. They cleaned up their act. They got a lot of pressure about road deaths. Like we got to talk about this, and what about this drug they give people, like whatever. So they try, and then what they did is they politicize it. And this is the point. They don't want you to go to places that are not necessarily friends with the U.S. And it's a weapon, right? And insurance companies, businesses look at that and go, well, I'd like to set up a hotel in Cuba, but I can't. It's sanctioned. Like Cuba's not our enemy. Cuba's not firing rockets into Miami. So I don't tell people ignore it. I tell them to absorb whatever you can. But there's a reason why the State Department warnings are that bad, right?
And when you get on the ground, you often find a totally different story.
Well, that's the cliche, right? Like I went there and I had a good time. The State Department does have a lot of good statistics. I was in Kenya in the embassy. I was picking up a dead body, and they had all these people's luggage lined up. And I'm like, what's that? He said, those are all people that died last week. And I'm like, holy shit, there's a story, right? And so she took me through each piece of luggage, the rolly luggage, and this person did this, and this person stepped out in front of a van, and this person took the wrong medication. I'm like, that's the shit you need to put on your website.
What are the big dangers of travel in your mind? Like, what should people actually be worried about? Because I think people go, oh, there's a rebel group here. There's a drug cartel here.
So first of all, traveling is safer than staying at home because you're entering an ecosystem designed to keep you safe, right? So typically when you get on a plane, they do a lot more than you do when you get in your car, right? When you eat food at a restaurant, they spend a lot more time making sure it's better than the crap you eat at home. I'm just saying that, first of all, you're entering an ecosystem that's designed to protect people. Secondly, if you look at risks that kill people, and I'm not talking about expats that live overseas, it's the same thing that kills you here. It's literally drowning because you had too many beers, smacking your moped into a truck, because you don't know how to ride a moped. Heart attacks, it's like dull, boring stuff. And there is no oh my God, don't go here because this will happen to you. Now, there are some diseases that you can pick up in tropical places. I would never eat at a buffet in Cairo, for example. I would never take an Acapulco dive tour. There's just certain things I wouldn't do because they're just ripe for killing people. But 9 times out of 10, when people travel, they have a less chance of dying than when they stay at home. Statistically, you're more likely to slip in your tub and hurt yourself than you are being eaten by a shark, kidnapped by a terrorist. The odds are embarrassing. There are some really good statistics on exposure to transportation and the dangers of how much time you spend, right? So then there are certain things you can look at, like should I take a bus or should I fly, right? Should I ride my bicycle? Should I take a moped, right? That people ignore all the time, right? So the basic truths that guide you here are the same ones that should guide you overseas.
Yeah, that's a really good lesson.
And by the way, there are people, if you go to Mardi Gras, I tell people this all the time because I laugh. Go sit on the balcony and watch the crowd. And the crowd will flow like a river, right? It'll move. And there'll be people that are sitting in one spot. And you'll see them signaling to people in the crowd, right? And you'll see this infrastructure, this ecosystem of crime that deliberately targets tourists. Go to an airport in Pakistan, go to an airport in Mexico City. You'll see certain people that shouldn't be there, and they're trying to hustle, right? They're using tourists like piranha eat fish, or sharks eat minnows. So you don't have to be a genius to stay healthy and safe.
But it's kind of about paying attention. and being aware in the first
Well,
place.
yes, and so there is one danger, like people get shit-faced on vacation, right? They assume that, I'm in a resort, so hey, let's go for that 8th margarita and let's go swimming, right? Like, yes, there is that stupidity factor.
Yeah. And in terms of like those sorts of crime that you were talking about, it's one, not drinking enough, but just paying attention to your surroundings in the first place. Like, I feel like people just kind of, maybe they don't do it at home, but on vacation, it's just like, oh, things are good. I'm just in the moment.
Well, if you're looking for criminals, just go where tourists go, because tourists get preyed on by criminals. Now, I'll tell you a funny statistic the most dangerous country on earth. Do you know that one?
No.
Statistically. No, you don't, because nobody pays attention. It's the Vatican, okay, the Holy See. Statistically, the most dangerous place because it has more crime than any other country on earth. And people are going to say, they're typing already, like, that guy's full of crap. No, what happens is they have so many tourists that come to visit the Vatican, the Holy See, and whatever, and there are parking lots full of criminals who watch people go in knowing they're going to be gone for 2 hours, 3 hours, or whatever. And the only place I've ever had all my stuff stolen, let me guess, is the Vatican, right? When I came back to the car, I looked around and I looked at the hill, and there's all these kids just sitting on the hill waiting for people to lock their car and like look around, make sure they're safe. And then they run down, pop the trunk, steal their crap.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the police, they go, what a terrible thing. It's awful, but they'll never find your stuff, right? It's a business, right? So statistics can be misleading sometimes, but common sense is always the best path, right?
Yeah. Have you been surprised by the sort of, I guess, kindness and the people that you find in places as compared to what's generally portrayed in the media? You talked about propaganda.
Not really. I mean, remember, I'm the kind of guy that's driving down the road. I think it was Ohio or something like that. And I saw this beautiful farmhouse on a hill, and this, the sky's that blue color. And they were like, the windows were on and they were yellow. And I'm like, I drove up the guy's driveway. I banged on the door and I said, I need to take pictures of your house, Jim. I said, and he said, come on in, I said, no, I want to take pictures of yours right now because the light's fading. So when you're done, you come back in. And, they give me food and they talk to me. What you doing? Like, and I send them pictures. Now, he thinks I'm a nice guy. I think he's a nice guy. It's no different when I'm on the front lines in Afghanistan. People are like, nobody takes my picture when I'm at work. And I'm like, okay, I'll take your picture. Are there assholes out there? Absolutely. Are there there's a lot of tweaked people out there, right? That don't like foreigners or white people, whatever, you got to watch for them. You got to watch their eyes and their movements. There's a lot of people that are stoned, they're drunk, that want to do bad things to you because they took some medicine or some chemical or drug, alcohol. So, but are those people here? Yeah, of course. I mean, so at the end of the day, it's you learn to read people. You learn to find those people that are nice to you, not trying to con you. And again, I've got a great BS filter. My whole life has been figuring out what's genuine and what's not. So maybe that's part of it.
Is it something to sort of, should people sort of listen to those spidey senses, for a lack of a better term? Like if something feels off, let's listen to that?
You're an animal. Yeah, of course, you're an animal, right? And animals only look forward. They don't look behind them or whatever. And I used to teach counter-surveillance to like a special forces unit down here in San Diego, special operations unit. Most people live in a very mammalian world, right? We're always in a hurry to get somewhere. We're hungry, we're late, so we look this way, right? We don't have eyes on the side of our head, and we definitely don't have them in the back of our head. But if you stop and turn around and watch people coming at you or go down a back alley, loop around and come back out and see who's still there, you start, figuring out the rhythm, right? And remember I was telling you about Bourbon Street, right? During Mardi Gras. It is an ecosystem, right? And in the age of the tech neck or whatever you want to call it, where people are like literally staring at their phones, looking around, oh my God, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I read a 1,000-page book on this stuff. And my podcast tries to gently back people into this world. And the podcast is basically the foundation for the next edition of the World's Most Dangerous Places. And I'm surprised how much of it focuses on psychological dangers and technical dangers rather than physical dangers.
What are your tips for communicating with new people you're meeting when you go to these places? How do you approach those interactions?
Well, first of all, the most interesting thing in the world is not you, it's them, right? So it's fairly. I used to set up meetings, secret meetings between one-star American generals and Taliban leaders in Kabul. And I remember this one general was like, "What the hell am I going to ask this guy?" And he demanded that I have my SAS guy and my SF guy with a pistol in plain clothes. And I said, "Nobody's going to shoot anybody, right? We're going to have a good meal." It was an Italian restaurant called Rumi, and I would use the top floor. And he said, "What the hell, man?" He's scared. And I'm like, "Okay, ask him about his kids. Talk about the weather. Ask him what kind of meal he likes. Ask the things you would ask your neighbor if you were at a baseball game, And they would do this, and then they would kind of move into why are you fighting mode, right? That kind of discussion. And they would come back saying, wow, I had no idea, of the history of this place, the view these people have of us. Yeah, they love Americans. They want to know why the hell you're shooting at them, because remember, you're the ones that helped them get rid of the Russians. You believe in God, pickup trucks and guns. You don't have a beard, but, the SF guys do. And they want to get rid of bad people, and you're supposed to be good people, but you're shooting at them. And they believe in God and all these. It's just bizarre, right? When you look at the context of some of these wars we fought. But it allows these people to go, I'm not afraid of the Taliban anymore. I get them. I get why they're doing what they're doing.
That's such a great metaphor for so many things that people fear.
What's that, God's gun and pickup trucks?
Yeah, half the country.
We have linkages. We have linkages with just about everything.
Yeah, but you don't understand those linkages unless you go actually have the conversation or do the thing. It's like fear is kind of this thing that gets felt prior to the actual experience.
All right, but I'll tell you a cautionary tale. So when I went to Chechnya, I had to link up with every terrorist group, every military group, every political group. So they said, okay, who's the Sasquatch? That's Pelton. What the hell is he doing here? Is he a Russian spy? Is he trying to do something? No, he's the guy that writes that book. He's cool, right? And he's on Discovery, right? That was the big thing. Yeah. I met with the FBI. The FBI harassed me, we want to know about your trip. I said, buy my damn book. I said, come on, tell us about your trip. I said, buy my damn book. Invest the money, use government funds. Yeah. No, we just want, we're big fans. We want to sit down with you, right? So these two guys sit down with me. And I said, I tell them the story of going to Chechnya, which you can read in Hunter, Hammer, and Heaven, right? It's a good story because it's hellacious, right? Just the amount of ordnance dropped on me and stuff like that. And I said, I'll only do this if you give me the transcript. You remember, FBI agents don't take notes, right? They just sit there and stare at you. And they wear these cheap polos and they try to look like undercover. Right? Anyways, so I said, when you write your report, send a copy to me because there's a lot of foreign names and I talk fast and whatever. So they leave. About a year later, I get a note. Oh, when did you meet with Basayev? I said, I didn't meet with him. I told you that. I said, I went to his house and he was gone. I said, okay. Week later, when did you meet? I said, look, send me the damn report because I have a terrible feeling that you guys are idiots, that you wrote down a bunch of stuff that I didn't say. So asked me another question. I said, look, this bullshit, I'm not doing this again. So I lose my passport in Istanbul. I come back, I have a Canadian passport. And I tell the truth. I go to the customs guy at LAX and I say, hey man, I lost my US passport. You know who I am. You can type my name in there. But here's my Canadian passport. He said, go in the room with the hookers and the drug dealers. Okay, fine. So I go in this room. I sit there for 2.5 hours. Now they're messing with me because they put your passport on the wall and you can tell when you came in and when other people are leaving. And I'm sitting there. And every time I go up to say, hey man, come on, man, they put their hand on their gun and sit down. And I'm like, okay, we're going to play it that way. Fine. I finally get called up. This guy opens a computer and I say to him, hey man, I'm fairly famous. You just Google me. You'll see who I am. You can, literally my passport and my visas are on the internet. Yeah. Silence. So he reads this report for 45 minutes. And I'm like, dude, what, is this a book? Come on, man. I'm dying of old age here. He gets to the end of the thing and he goes, that's pretty cool. You're famous. And I said, isn't that how this conversation started? And he gets me back my passport and I go.
Tell us about when you got kidnapped in Colombia. What was that story?
Okay, so I blame my wife. Yeah, so right now I blame my wife. I was in Liberia, which I told you about, which was very gory. My gunman gave me a severed head after a battle. There are people eating things that they shouldn't eat. Jeez. And there's just a lot of shooting, a lot of dead people, okay? I filmed it all. Bring it back, give it to Discovery. They edited it. And to their credit, they ran it. And it was like, holy shit. that's on TV. It's like one of these like 60s French movies, like Mondo Cane. But I said, that's what's happening right now in the country that we created, Liberia, right? They're literally, they have what looks like the American flag. They have the Pledge of Allegiance. These people are waiting for American to save them. So my wife says, man, you tweaked. I said, no, I'm not tweaked. That's how it is in that place. Other people looked at it like, damn, man, you got to, jeez, you know? And I said, okay, what do you want me to do? He said, well, you work for National Geographic. You should do a hiking and camping story. And I said, I hate hiking and camping. Ever since I went to this survival boarding school.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'll do it. I said, I get it. Maybe I should just like shift a little bit into the old expedition stuff I used to do, right? So I always wanted to do the Darien Gap. When I was 19, I hitchhiked from Vancouver down to South America, to Panama specifically. And at that time, this was in 75, you could hike the Darien Gap. It's just, it was dangerous and people warned you off. And I was running out of money, and I thought, do I hike the Darien Gap or do I go live on a tropical island? I'm like, let me think about that for a second. I go, okay, I'm going to live on a tropical island. So I went to San Andreas, which is a big drug smuggling center, and I broke people out of jail. And I really enjoyed myself, and I did that, but I didn't do the Darien Gap. So I went to my editor at National Geographic Adventure and said, okay, I want to find 2 young people who want to hike the Gap. I'm going to be like the old burnt out adventure guy. They're going to be the young, adventure people. And we'll talk about why we do what we do. Yeah. What's adventure, why the risk, blah, blah, blah. It's a brilliant idea, actually. I get there, I find 2 people who had no intention of hiking the Darien Gap, but when they saw me doing it, they go, oh, I'm going with Robert. So they were 22, 23. And we start off, and they literally fly a helicopter out to stop us. Like the Panamanian police fly a helicopter and say, what are you doing? And then they go, oh, it's that guy, So I say, look, I've talked to the leaders of the FARC. I interviewed all of them. I told them I was coming. I talked to the leaders of the death squads, Carlos Castaño. I set up an interview with him. I'm pretty comfortable that I know all the groups here, that if I run into them, they can vouch for me. Well, 2 days in, there was an ambush, and they killed an Indian guide, not our guide, but a guy that was on the path. And we had a decision to make, and I said, I'm going to walk into the ambush. I'm pretty comfortable with ambushes, and I know what to do and whatever. And they're like, cool. And I'm like, no, it's not cool at all. It's like really dicey because
it's the best bad decision.
You're going to be... yes, exactly. I said, we can turn around, but they're going to see our footprints. We're in the jungle, right? And we could go down into the wilderness, but I don't think you guys are going to find your way out. We were deep in the jungle, right? And I said, I'm going to walk into the ambush. You stay about 500 yards, 200 yards behind. Talk really loud in English. When they start shooting, if I roll left, you roll right. And then you can run away, right? But I think if I can make contact with these people, I can find out who they are, what happened, blah, blah, blah. So that's what I did. And they were all jacked up because they just, ambushed these guys and tell us, put our hands up, put our hands down, do this. And of course, everybody bunched up. And they wanted to execute our guide. And I said, no, you can't. I said, why? I said, because I'm with the Discovery Channel. I'm with National Geographic. And these people know these brands, which is hilarious. And you'll be on trial for war crimes, which is a ballsy thing to do when you're at gunpoint in the jungle. And we sat there with their hands on our head and, on their knees. And this guy comes up and he gets on a log and he starts making a speech about, we're the FARC, we're here to liberate the people, blah, blah, all this bullshit. And I could see that his shirt was on backwards, inside out, right? And when I had walked up to this ambush site, it said clearly on it, AUC Beck, which is the oldest death squad in Colombia. So I knew they were death squad. So this is really strange. And so I said to Mark and Meg, do not speak Spanish. Do not give them any indication you can speak Spanish. Just be stupid, stupid, stupid. And Mark, bless his pointed little head, got really friendly with them, but they were bullshitting him about being leftist guerrillas. And they were not. They were right-wing death squads. Yeah. And they went past us and they murdered all these people at a village we'd stayed in. And we were walked at gunpoint towards Colombia. And my point is that they couldn't communicate with their leaders because we were so deep in the jungle. So their radios didn't go all the way to their headquarters down south. So anyway, when we got to the South, they made us sleep in the middle of a soccer patch, and they had like 5 guys in each corner with their guns on us, which I thought was kind of weird. And then they took us into a graveyard in the morning. I said, this is not working out the way it's supposed to.
Not looking good.
And they took Mark away. And I said, oh, if I hear a gunshot, that means that they just shot him, right? And I said, but I don't think they're going to shoot him because we've been walking for so long. It's kind of weird, right? So he disappears, and then they come for Meg. I said, no, we'll go together. There's no reason. They're like, no. I just argued with them. I said, no, fuck you. We're going to go together. And so I kind of walked real slow. I got to tie my shoe up. I got to do this. And they didn't seem to care. So I thought, okay, they're not nervous about me kind of lagging behind. So I come into the riverbed, and there's Mark in the middle of all these old guys. It's like beautiful riverbed, like stones and water flowing, and all these horses with like silver decorated saddles. And Mark is chain smoking. Now, he doesn't smoke, but he's puffing on a cigarette, and all these guys are laughing. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And Mark, they're not going to shoot us, Robert. And I'm like, yeah, they're not going to shoot us. They're actually the death squads. They're not FARC. And I'm like, yeah, that's right, Mark. That's right. That's what I've been telling you for 10 days. So they realized that they'd captured this guy, and Carlos Castaño knew who we were. Carlos actually sent a press release out to Reuters saying we were being held for our safety, which is kind of BS. Yeah. But they then kidnapped us again because they wanted me, when they found out that I was working for Discovery, they wanted me to interview their leader, whose name was Commander Aleman, which is not like the Nazis, just because I like to be on time.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not in the mood to interview anyone. And he brought this big fat guy with a red cross on his T-shirt. And he said, that's our human rights director. I said, oh, so that's the guy that decides whether you use chainsaws or rocks to smash people's heads in?
Yeah, human rights director for the death squads.
Yeah, exactly. And I just this is irony defined. And really, I don't want to interview you. I have no interest in promoting your whatever it is you want me to do. And then they all lined up. There's 176 of them. In this horrible little abandoned finca, this ranch that we were being held in. And they all came by and shook my hand and then, cheered and smiled. And then there was this priest. And this priest took us into town. And I said, I just want a good meal. I want a cold beer. I want a good steak. And I want to eat too much. And I want to drink too much. I just want to sleep. Just sleep, without insects or anything. So anyway, at the end of the day, we got sort of kidnapped by the military, who insisted I had to go to the embassy, and they wanted me to press charges. And I'm like, no. I said, when these guys come for me with a little axe, you're not going to be there. And this is their war. It's not my war. I'm the guy that went for a hike in the middle of their military operation. And that's just the way. If you want me to press murder charges, yes, I met with these people. They went and murdered all these people that we had met with. So anyway, that was what happens when I go hiking and camping.
Which is why you don't like to hike and camp.
Well, I end up doing that, but I don't choose to write about it because I prefer conflict.
You mentioned that you haven't you use the language tweaked. Have these experiences affected you going home?
No, I learned something from.
And why is that?
Well, I learned something from people who actually fight for a living. Is you need a decompression window. So when you are in combat or in conflict, your adrenaline is just pumping, just pump, 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 whether you like it or not. Whether you can be the coolest cucumber, it's still you're on edge, right? You're paying attention. Everything's crystal clear. And I would admit I think I have ADHD. So in a normal world, I don't pay attention, but in a intense world, I'm like crystal clear. Like I'm really, really good in emergencies. And but you cannot go from an environment in which people are trying to kill you all the time to an environment where there's a backfire in a shopping mall and you think that somebody just fired off a rocket or a gun or something. So you need that decompression. And if you do that, then you don't snap at your wife, you don't get mad about things, and you process what you've seen, right? Now, the other thing is I don't kill people for a living. So there's a big difference between, let's say, killing a child or a woman or dropping a bomb on a girls' school or something and having to process that, right? I have not committed crimes overseas or here, actually, I should clarify that. And I totally respect that we put our troops through hellacious, intense experiences that are not processed, that are not decompress, that are not respected as being soul-searing, right? And I also include brain damage from IEDs and things like that, right? There are a lot of people who have been physically damaged that were not treated properly. And, I talk to lots and lots and lots of people that have PTSD, and they just, they can't deal with it. And they try all different things. And yes, there are ways to deal with it, but it's got to be a respected part of sending people to war. And when I was a kid, I had relatives that used to just sit, old guys that were in World War I, and they would just spit into a can and chain smoke players' cigarettes. They never talked, never mentioned what they did in the war. Yeah. So we've always had it. We need to respect it, And when we launch a war, we need to say, dude, whoever fired those missiles into that girls' school is dealing with that right now, And the stupid guy who told him to do that needs to be held accountable. And so this is what's missing from warfare. It's kind of like, push a button, boop, drone, boop. Anyway, I'm not a crusader for that, but we're in a different kind of warfare.
Yeah. You mentioned with going to Colombia, part of the thing was to have you explain why you take the risk. Why do you take the risk?
Well, everything's a risk. I mean, you have a 100% chance of dying.
Yeah.
It's just maybe you can help choose a little bit about how that happens. I have never, when I was a kid, I used to play chicken at stoplights I used to hide behind a mailbox and run out and see if the cars could stop in time. I mean, I was a terrible kid. I don't think I view risk the same way that other people do. And remember, I keep saying there's old ladies there. So it's not like I'm like, oh, look at this guy. He's walking on the street. Yeah. There's a danger. I know in Chechnya, you can become transcendent. So, I used to sleep above ground, and they used to take out houses every night, and I slept like a baby, right? And they used to use these ergon rockets, which were loud, right? Like boom, 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 boom. I wake up in the morning, and there'd be a house gone, 2 houses down, 3 houses, 4 houses, whatever. So you can become transcendent. And when I used to walk down the street in Grozny, people used to clap, because, there's an American here, yay, he's brave and he's sharing this and that. But you actually don't believe you're going to die. You literally erase the fear. And a lot of people will tell you this story where you come under fire and your brain kicks into this higher level of survival where you're just smooth and practiced and whatever. And, I've seen this with some of the Green Beret friends I have, is they just kick in and they'll kill 5 or 6 people and then go right back to what they're doing. So it's a really weird place you don't want to be, right? To be above the normal fear level, I guess, is what it is. So
yeah. How do you draw the line between, a lot of people who do what you do have died in the process. How do you draw the line between you're going there to get a story you think is important to tell versus the risk level is too high and it just becomes sort of dumb?
I think I start with the initial impetus, like the Iraq War was a good example. I helped make a documentary about just how terrible that war was sold and the amount of duplicity and lying and deceit that our government went through. When I say our government, I mean, Bush Jr. and the neocons, to create a violent cataclysm that had nothing to do with America's safety. And I've lost friends in almost all those wars. But I lost one friend who was on they talk about the horse soldiers, ODA 595, who I kind of adopted, and they used my logo, and I would make sure they were outfitted before they went out every time they were deployed with my DPX gear knives. And when I first met Bill Bennett, he was literally going in to get Mike Spann's body at Kelly Jangi. And he's like, are you the guy that's on TV? And I'm like, yeah. He said, oh man, I love that show. You got any hats? And so I said, yeah. So I gave him some hats. And that kind of became their thing, right? And they had just spent 2 weeks dropping bombs on the Taliban and whatever. So Bill and I became very close. And when he went into the Iraq War, we talk all the time. And he sent me an email like, man, I don't think I'm going to make it out of this war. And I'm like, why, man? Like, why are you talking like this? I don't know. I just got a bad feeling. And he was ready to go home. And his wife had decorated his house with "Welcome Back, Bill." He had a young son. And he was killed. He was killed in Ramadi wearing gear that had my logo on it, right?
Oh, geez.
So you lose people, and you have to respect just how important they were to their family or their friends and whatever. And I think if you multiply that times however many people died in the Iraq War on both sides and also in this current conflict, is a terrible thing to start a war like that without being able to explain to those families why people lost their lives. I don't know how many funerals you've been to for soldiers or how many kids you've talked to that never met their dads or whatever, but it's a serious weight, right?
What do you always take on your trips?
Money. There is no better solution when you get into shit than money. I take about $5,000 usually, although these days it's probably not enough.
That's the number one safety lever.
You need, it has to be brand new dollars, right? Not the old, nobody takes the old shit anymore. And it's got to be, you got to break it down into 20s, 5s, and 10s so that, the only thing, you don't want to have just $100. Obviously today everybody brings a cell phone, but I also bring a dummy cell phone. I have a special phone that can't be traced, can't be hacked, but if they want it at the airport, more power to them. And it's so cool, it doesn't even have a name. So it's like, I take gifts for people. So on the high end, I'll take knives that I make, the DPI skier knives, which are expensive knives. And they'll go to the commanders or somebody that did something, special for me. And they're obviously well appreciated. I'll take small gifts. Well, I used to hang up Mr. DP stickers, the ones that go on all the weapons you see. Hats, T-shirts, stuff like that. Hot sauce. I always bring crystal hot sauce because sometimes the food is not to your liking. Although, again, like when I was in Ukraine, I ate the most beautiful restaurants you could imagine. Yeah. And I kept thinking, it's not like the old days. It's not like the old days. I think sat phone is, I don't know if people run sat phones or inReaches. And now Apple's have the ability to text from your phone on a sat network, which could come. I was in Chad and my car broke down. And so I had like an inReach and I was able to chat with people and using the satellite, not the cell phone, of course. I take like a first aid kit that includes drugs for stomach upset or whatever. And a lot of times I buy those drugs there, just, Cipro and stuff like that. But I try not to bring too much. And of course I bring a DPI skier knife, but I bring multiple DPI skier knives. Sometimes iPads, like those small iPads, are really helpful, for maps and reading and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you make the decision to bring either too much or not enough. And I always err on the side of not bringing too much. I think if you're taking more than carry-on when you're traveling around the world, and by the way, I bring cameras with me too, so it's not like I have a wardrobe and everything. Right. I think, as I've lectured people many times, it's like, try traveling with nothing. It scares people, right? Like, don't go to a store and say, oh, I need this because I'm doing that. I got to get one of those because the color. Don't take a water bottle. Don't take like fancy shoes. Because I say everywhere I go and I hire a guide, the guy just grabs a plastic bag, throws his toothbrush in it, and off we go. Yeah. And in today's world, you can get just about anything, not me, because I got size 13 feet, but you can get just about anything you need anywhere in the world. That's a fun lesson for no matter who you are and where you're going. That's a fun experiment. The more stuff you carry, the more likely you are to lose that stuff. Yeah. If you pack things like a $20 watch, not a $2,000 watch, not your Apple Watch, but I mean like a used Timex, you give it away. Like everything that you have with you, you should be able to give away. Maybe your iPhone's a little too precious, but then why are you taking it? Because then you've got something else to worry about. Why not take an old Android, a piece of crap Android or something? So yeah, I mean, the more stuff you carry, the more likely you are to lose it or to worry about it, which then creates a whole chain of like, I learned this, by the way, because I bicycled across Europe and I thought, I can't do anything because I got this damn bicycle and I can't leave it anywhere. So I'm always worried about somebody's going to steal my bicycle. And when I sold it, I was like, I'm free at last, right? I can go anywhere I want. Like when I was in the Vatican, they stole all my stuff. I thought, this is cool. Yeah. I need to brush my teeth. I'm going to buy a toothbrush. I need a new shirt. I'm going to go buy a new shirt. Like it's cool. Yeah. And that's just a great way to insert adventure into wherever you're going. One thing that when I was in Iraq, I found that American cigarettes were useful, particularly Marlboros. It's like you just hand someone a Marlboro, they're immediately your friend and they'll talk to you. Correct. And I used to bring lots of cigarettes, and then I realized that people started vaping, and and then they have all kinds of different duty restrictions for bringing cigarettes over, and so I buy them locally. But yes, cigarettes are a great form of currency. Where are some off the beaten path places that the average person could go that you recommend? Well, first of all, we're all average, so I don't know why you say that. I mean, anybody can go just about anywhere. I guess it's what you want to do. Like, I choose what I do because it interests me. But if it didn't interest me, I wouldn't do it. Like, I would, so if you don't like what I do, don't do that. Like, if you're an art collector, or if you're an archaeological nut, there's so many cool places out there. Like, I like Libya, and people go, oh, here you go, plugging a war zone. You can fly into Tripoli. You can go to Magnus Lepta or Leptis Magnus, whatever it's called. See this amazing deserted city that's only like half excavated, or not even that. And go, holy shit, I just saw something that rarely anybody sees. And I'm like filled with love for history and the whole, what happened. There's really cool places like Somalia. You go to Somalia and you could learn all about the ancient civilizations in Somalia and go, I didn't know that. Like, I really didn't know that they existed. Ethiopia, I mean, and these places all have active conflict going on, not in the place you're going, but they're considered, war zones. Afghanistan, strangely enough. And here's the funny thing. So you go on YouTube now, and what I used to do, which was like, I'm going to this country, nobody's there, it's just me, and they're just killing the hell out of each other. Now it's like, I'm going to the world's most dangerous places, and I didn't get killed. So we have a whole industry of people doing what I did with their phones, right? And, more power to them. I don't know why they should portray them as dangerous places, but I think the barriers are dropping. And, I'd like to go to Iran right now because I think it's interesting to understand what the hell is going on in Iran. And I'm not supporting Iran. I'm not supporting, the idea that the Ayatollahs want to do all this damage to the global economy, but I just want to see. Because I'm not getting, like Al Jazeera has a couple of guys there. Mm-hmm. The Iranians let in some Western journalists very briefly. I don't know what's going on in Gaza. I see some stuff from the West Bank. Is it biased? Is it true? Lebanon's getting flattened. There's just a lot of places where there's just, I don't know, not a lot of interest in coverage that goes deep, right? Yeah. Like, it has to be on the news every day. And this was what killed journalism, was hotel journalism, right? You got to be on the roof every night to pitch your story. And God forbid you go out, buy a Rolls Royce like I did, and just get lost into the countryside at the peak of the war. Because that doesn't work today in today's news. After all of your work, what do you think people often get wrong about what makes life worth living and interesting? Okay, so we don't choose to be born, right? We're either an accident like I was, or we're the love of somebody's eye and we just are raised. But you don't realize how the clock is ticking until you get in your 40s. And even then, like, I was woken up by my mentors and my father dying unexpectedly, right? And, I drove a Rolls Royce. I had a beautiful home. I had a half acre on the ocean. I had my name on my building. What more could you want that I had? But I thought, I need to do that thing that I always wanted to do, the education side of it. And I got to get going. And most people say, well, I can't. I need to do this. I can't do that because of this. And I'm like, no, every second that goes by is a second you're not doing the thing that you really should be doing if you're unhappy. If you're happy, keep doing that thing, right? And don't be afraid to reinvent yourself. I love that. Feels like a great place to end. Robert, thanks so much for coming on the show. I enjoyed the conversation. Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show. Thanks for checking out the show, and thanks to Robert for swinging by to tell us those wild stories with good takeaways. As a reminder, we're in your feed twice a week, so please keep an eye out for more. Review the show, subscribe to the show. That helps us, and it helps you by keeping you aware of all the new episodes that are coming out. Check out the iHeart app. You can watch this show for free on it. And as always, have fun, don't die, and listen to Robert. If you listen to Robert, you probably won't die.